taking out $1,000. I've lost the bet. Chris 50s. Lost the bet. Fuck you, Rufo. Welcome to Conversations with Peter Boghossian. I just had one of the best conversations I've ever had with Dr. Eitan Haim. He is a surgeon who exposed transgender madness. I flew down to Texas to speak to him, and I lost a $1,000 bet with Chris Rufo, so I paid in person, and I'm so happy that I have lost that bet, and I'm so happy that I got an opportunity to meet with him and his family. You will find this interview to be profoundly disturbing, as I have, but I think it's extremely important, and I think this is exactly the sort of thing that the world needs to hear about. Enjoy. Eitan Haim, welcome to Conversations with Peter Boghossian. Thanks for having us in your home.
Yeah, thank you for, I didn't think we were actually going to do it, but, you know.
Well, I've come down. I actually have something to give you.
Yeah.
I lost a bet to Chris Rufo about how long this deranged, demented ideology would last. I said it'd be out 6 months. So here, as you can see, in Chris' brand new 50s is $1,000.
Yep. And yeah, so what we'll do is we're going to donate this to our legal fund, you know. So the next thing we'll do is we'll videotape us, you know, putting this into our fund. And then,
all right.
But
all right.
I mean, really, it means a lot, you know.
Well, you displayed true, like genuinely what you did was absolutely the right thing to do. And so for those who don't know the story, just give us a quick rundown before we dive into some specifics.
Yeah. Well, you know, first of all, I'm glad that this bet had brought you to our small town outside Dallas,
It's been good
Texas.
to get to know you, man.
Yeah. So my name is Eitan Haim. I'm a general surgeon. I work, 30 miles east of here in an even smaller town, and do all types of general surgery. But, I blew the whistle on the largest children's hospital in the world, Texas Children's Hospital, lying to the public about the existence of their transgender program, a program that resulted in the manipulation, mutilation, sterilization of young children. They said they shut this program down in March of 2022.
And just to be clear, children we're talking about under 18.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. And the largest children's hospital in the world. And the other departments do amazing work, but I couldn't believe that they were doing this. They said they were shutting it down in March of 2022 because of potential legal liability, potential criminal liability. And why they said that is because the Texas AG, Attorney General Ken Paxton, had issued an opinion a few weeks before saying that these interventions could be investigated as child abuse. So it kind of makes sense as to why they would release that statement. They want to cover themselves. Yeah. So they're going to say they're shutting down the program, but I worked there, right? I was doing surgery there. And over the next couple of months, I found out that they were categorically lying about it, that they did not stop the program, that they just continued it and expanded it. They had turned it into a multidisciplinary clinic. They had made it a hospital-wide priority. The directors of the program that supposedly did not exist were giving the opportunity to speak at the hospital's most prestigious lecture series. And
Grand Rounds.
Grand Rounds, yeah. And I was thinking to myself, like, how is it possible? I didn't believe it for months that this hospital's lying about something like this, because as a doctor, the only currency we have with a patient is trust. And to lie about something so egregiously is unconscionable. You can't even believe that they would do it. So once I realized that this is happening and that they're harming children, then I have a responsibility to do something about it.
And when you say harming, like, we're talking actual surgical procedures.
Yeah. Yeah, where they're implanting these puberty-blocking devices into 11, 12, 13-year-old children. And people see these medications, right? The puberty blocker is like not as bad as like the other surgeries, like mastectomies or vaginoplasties or whatever. But what happens is you insert this medication into a child's body, and it's like undergoing 1 million microsurgeries every single day, because there's no surgery in the world that can deprive your brain of the hormones necessary to become an adult. There's no surgery in the world that can make your bones brittle to become like a 65-year-old osteoporotic woman. Like there's no surgeon in the world that can have an 18, 19, 20-year-old man still have the penis the size of an 11-year-old, right? And these hormones are released from something called your hypothalamus. And in Greek, that translates to beneath the inner chamber. Like these hormones are what give rise to our emotional experience, the way we interact with the world, how we fall in love, how we experience fear. And when they shut down this process, they shut down the most important process of human development, which is our progression into adulthood, right? With these hormones. So it's like, it makes sense that these hormones are released from the hypothalamus, because if there was one thing we should protect, it's beneath the inner chamber. It's the hypothalamus. It's one thing we should not mess with.
And okay, so there's so much going on here. Okay, so how many kids are we talking about?
You know, I can't give you a definitive number for that.
Every time I ask that people say the same thing, because they don't keep records or they don't.
We're talking about hundreds in this program, probably hundreds. But in the country,
its inception.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, for sure. Yeah, probably hundreds.
And how long had the program been going on?
I'm not sure. Probably for years.
And they don't release the records. They're not publicly.
Well, they said to the public that they were shutting down the program, but they just continued behind closed doors. They lied. Yeah. And there's nothing else in medicine or surgery that you would ever even consider doing something like that.
Lying, you mean?
Yeah.
Oh, you mean saying we're going to shut down the cardiac unit and then still admitting patients for cardiac surgery?
Yeah.
For heart surgery?
Yeah, and it's like the nature of their response reveals like the nature of their conduct. It's like the fact that they have to lie about it goes to show that they're doing something wrong, because there's nothing a doctor should be doing that they're unwilling to defend in public.
That's not transparent.
Yeah. And especially when you're doing it to 11 or 12-year-old children. Like there's nothing you should be doing to an 11-year-old child that you should not be willing to defend in public.
Yeah, put it on the front page of the New York Times.
Yeah.
Would their response to that be, well, we did this because there are these religious maniacs, these Republicans out there who are out to get us, and they don't understand that many children really are trapped in the wrong body?
Well, there's no way for us to know, because after our story came out, right, in May 16th, 2023, they never offered a defense. They never said a single word about it. Nothing. So, and within 24 hours of our story coming out, the conduct we had exposed was reaffirmed as illegal by a bill passed in the Texas Senate with bipartisan support, right? So it's my opinion that this has always been illegal. Like it's illegal to mutilate children, right? To use disease of their mind as evidence of disease in their body, right? Like you cannot do that. You can't do lobotomies on children. If a child says that they shouldn't have their arm attached to their body, a surgeon cannot just amputate their arm, right? It's because this has been infused with politics from the very beginning. There's this cutout in the Overton window where we accept it, but there's no other field in medicine that we would ever accept something like this, because what they're doing to these children is heinous.
I'm trying to think of the problem with people not talking to you who disagree with you is that you don't really actually know what you think, so you have to kind of guess what they think. Would the response to them be, what would the response be?
The truth. And the response is that this idea that a transgender identity is based on biological reality, it's not true. There's nothing in objective reality that points to that being true. And that's like not just a theoretical thing, because I operate on people. Yeah. Yesterday, I was operating on people all day long, right? I take them to an operating room because there is something in their body that's diseased, right? So I ask them questions during the history I ask them what kind of symptoms they're having, how long it's been going on for, what other things have been going on. I ask them about their history. I do a physical exam. I do labs. I do imaging, right? That all points to this idea that there is something wrong in their body, something that's real. When I take them to the operating room, I better make sure that what that is truly real and that I'm right the majority of the time. And that's exactly what it is. In 99.9% of cases, I've done thousands and thousands of cases at this point. I've only had one case where the disease I was going after was not the disease I thought was there. And that's common for other surgeons.
What was the disease?
It was, I thought someone had a bowel obstruction from scar tissue in their abdomen. So I opened them up and they didn't have anything, right? Every point, every data point in that, pointed to this idea that this person had scar tissue in their abdomen. So I tell them that's a point of informed consent, that I'm likely going to find scar tissue in your abdomen, but there's a chance I find nothing, right?
And with the trans and kid thing, there's no test for it.
Exactly. So they're saying that this is standard of care, that this is objective reality, that this idea in your mind is evidence of disease in your body. So what they're doing is applying physical solutions to a psychological problem, something that you cannot reliably diagnose with testing. So like if these people were to go to a different country, right, they would be treated entirely different, right? Like if you have appendicitis, right, you're going to find that same appendicitis in the United States versus if it's in China, right? The appendicitis is going to look the same. But in this case, right, it's completely different. It's not objective. This is entirely subjective. But what is not subjective is the destruction they're carrying out on that child's body, right? Because these are effects that we know are real. Like they will not go through puberty. They will develop irreversible changes to their hair distribution. They will develop uterine fibroids, vaginal atrophy, bone thinning, heart issues. They will not have the hormones necessary for adult development, right? These are things that are entirely predictable. And people undergo procedures like this that have high risk, right? If someone has heart failure and you have to implant a synthetic device into their heart to keep their heart pumping until they get a heart transplant, right? Because the complications for that are like 70%, right? The complications of these transgender interventions, like these surgeries, are about 75%. So you have one population, people who are guaranteed to die because of heart failure, but in the other ones, you have children who are entirely healthy.
Okay, well, this is a lot to take in. So as much as I do this, and as much as I keep trying to get out of this, these people are making it very difficult for me. So I keep trying to think about what their response would be. Would their response be, well, the W path, like we're working on the basis of the best available evidence? Would that be their response?
You know, what their response is trying to send me to prison for 10 years, right? That's what their response is. Like, these people do not have a response because there is no response. What they rely on is bully tactics. They require brute force, right? They require censorship, ideology, the strictest, most rigorous adherence to a political ideology in order to justify the mutilation, manipulation, and sterilization of these young children. There is no response, which is why they yell and they scream and they censor and they destroy, right? That's why they have to take someone like me, a doctor, a surgeon, and they have to put me in prison. They have to try for 10 years because they know if other doctors start speaking out, then this delicate house of cards is going to come crumbling down, right? Because the one last thing between them and the truth are the doctors and the nurses standing in between. And now it's starting to crumble. So now they're getting more desperate. But with me, they chose the wrong person, right?
God, I love that. Oh my God, thank you for, I mean, that's the other thing is we're in a society that's experiencing a crisis of cowardice. and people, they're just not speaking out. I mean, about everything, about the whole range of things. So what is it, like, so you made a decision knowing that you could go to a federal prison. I mean, that's intense.
Yeah.
That's deep.
Yeah.
So why do you think you did that and your colleagues did? Like, what is it about you that made you speak out against something so ghastly?
I don't know. I think that over the past couple of years, right? I started my surgical training in 2018.
Yeah.
And I was able to see medicine before and after COVID and all the changes that happened during COVID. And like before, it seemed like it was like the apex of American medicine, where it was like this rigorous debate. Like people had these, like if there was an issue in medicine or surgery, like we would talk about it, we would discuss it in a really kind of spirited way. People would disagree with each other, but after COVID, all that changed. And that had an actual effect on people. And like everyone, I don't want to discount everyone's experiences, because everyone experienced something very profound during COVID. Everyone lost things that were really, really big. But for me, I think it was unique because I was at like the bottom of the totem pole within the medical system. So I had the most contact with patients who were going through it. And I saw every single day how people would suffer and die alone, how they would spend weeks just going through the worst pain they've ever been going through. And then on the day of their death, it's just me, someone they hardly know, when they take their last breath. And then the guilt of their family for not being there during that last moment. And they have to carry that for the rest of their lives. But you know, I tried to fight against it, tried to do everything I could, but there's only so much I can do. And at a certain point, I become part of that system. I adopt that shame. But the worst part about all of it was what happened to the kids, because I was working at the kids' hospital too. So you would see like this abuse that was like never happened before. Because
what do you
kids,
mean abuse?
So kids were at school, right? They were being isolated. They had these masks on, so they couldn't say things. It was like once kids put masks on their face, like they knew that what they said didn't matter anymore. It was like, it was both a physical thing, but also a psychological thing. Kids couldn't express things. So when they would be abused, they wouldn't say it. So like we would have all these kids come in just dead because like they were being abused by like the baby's father because the mom was at work. So it was like these toxic environments. So the kids would get dropped, they would be shaken, they would just come in dead. So I became like very familiar with the sound a mother makes when you tell her that her child is dead. Like we had this one kid who came in, a bunch of her fingers were amputated, right? Because as a form of punishment, the parents would put the kid's fingers into a fan and they would just be cut off, right? But there was one thumb that was hanging on by a piece of skin and was getting infected. But this was like common, right? So I'm seeing all this, and then at the same time, I'm taking care of these kids with like chronic medical disorders, right? Like muscular dystrophy, cerebral palsy, cystic fibrosis, right? Where you're operating on them and you realize that like they just want to live a normal life. And like with this transgender thing, it was only after COVID that I became more familiar with it. And in one sense, you have these kids, when you get to know them, you realize with chronic medical diseases, like you're just like regular kids, but like they just have the same dreams as everyone else. They just want to ride bikes, chase girls, you know, like go to prom, and their parents want the same thing for them. But like their life is not going to be like that because they have this chronic disease. And I would take them to the OR and I would operate on them, and you see like the pain and suffering they have to go through. But we would do that, you know, we would take these sick kids, try to make them better, right? And like it was so sad because like whatever freedom, tiny bit they had was taken away because of a disease they had no control over. And then whatever was left was taken away during COVID, right? And then you have these other kids who are perfectly healthy, right? The kids who believe they're transgender. And then they're telling them that they're sick, but they're perfectly healthy. And in the same operating rooms, right? They're going in there and they're making them sick. They're making sure that both these populations are put into the same situation at the end when it's the kids who have chronic medical diseases who wish like nothing else that all they could have was a body of this perfectly healthy child. But it's these doctors, right? These butchers who take healthy kids and make them sick. And like after making that realization, after seeing everything these kids had taken away during COVID, right? After seeing these kids going to the same operating rooms as these other people I was operating on, I knew that like something had to be done. Like it's horrifying, like the horror of like operating on people and seeing that is something I could never describe.
And yet other people, in fact, virtually everybody, if not literally everybody else, probably literally everybody else did nothing.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know why.
Well, they're cowards.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that, I mean, hundreds of people knew, right? I mean, this was prioritized in the hospital.
They knew.
Yeah.
And they did nothing.
Yeah.
And they were complicit in a lie.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that for me, it's like I couldn't live with myself, right? So it's not like bravery. It's like not bravery to do, right? It's just like I fear something greater than what they can do.
I totally get that.
So it's like how could I ever live with myself? You know, how could I ever look at myself in the mirror or go home to my wife and my kids knowing that I didn't do the right thing when it was most important?
And the consequence of that is they now want to throw you in prison.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is just so crazy. Like, if this were just a little less crazy, I think it would be easier for people to understand. But it's just so crazy that it's hard for a normal person to listen to this and think that this is an accurate depiction of reality.
And especially when you look at like what they're charging me with, like there is such a disparity between the nature of their charges and the reality of the truth that I can't even begin to express it, you know? Like there was, when I first read the indictment, because I can't get into the details of it, because I have to wait for a trial, you know. Sure. But like when I first read it, I thought I was gonna like my heart was gonna drop, you know. But when I read it, the first thing was like relief, because it's like, yeah, this is political. These people are just as corrupt as I always knew they were. Like it's and when trial comes, like people are gonna see it, you know.
Okay, so this is the thing. This whole thing is disturbing on multiple levels, but one level that's really disturbing is the political aspect of this. And I'm trying to frame this in a way or ask you the question that's not explicitly political, but the problem is the whole thing is explicitly political. So I'm not sure, is it the Biden administration's? Like if Trump or RFK or some whether Republican or independent or libertarian would be in there, would the situation, would you be as concerned that you're going to be in prison?
No, I think that, yeah, no, this is political, right? Because the nature of what they're going after me for would criminalize every doctor in the United States.
In terms of whistleblowing?
Yeah, yeah. It would shut down the door on any medical whistleblower for the future of the United States, right? So, yeah, no, this is political. And this is because you have a Department of Justice, Health and Human Services, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, right? The most powerful federal investigative agency in the history of the world, who has become weaponized against whistleblowers like me in order to destroy people like me. Because when you think about what's going on in major American cities, you have murderers, rapists, traffickers, drug dealers walking free, right? Not being prosecuted. But they're coming after me with the entire force of the federal government. because I exposed that the largest children's hospital in the world was lying about a program, and within 24 hours it was reaffirmed as illegal. The hospital had acknowledged it was potentially illegal. They said they had shut it down, but they lied about it. This was a hospital that I was working at, I was operating at, but they say that I'm the one who's a criminal, right? Because they know they have to destroy me, but like, it's not gonna happen, because we're gonna fight back with everything we have. And like, that's what people should understand, is like, they think like, oh, it's so crazy for him to do this. Like, it's not crazy. It's not. Like, other people are crazy for not doing it, because if things are bad now, then what is it gonna be like in 10 years? Like, my wife is pregnant with our first daughter. She's gonna be born in October, and I might miss the first few years of her life, you know? But like,
from a prison cell, from a federal prison cell.
And what kind of life would I be delivering her into if I didn't fight back, right? So like, that is what we should be more afraid of. Not what these people can do to us. That's what we should be afraid of. Because if we don't fight back now, then we're gonna lose everything. And that's what the people listening to this should understand. Like, I'm a no one. Like, you guys saw where I live. We live in a small town because we wanted to move here, raise a family, live a quiet life, right? We're no one. We didn't want this, right? But when they came after us, we knew that there was no option but to fight back.
And these people want to put you in prison for a decade. They want to imprison you.
Yeah.
They want to literally, that's not a metaphorical prison. This is, they want to put you in prison.
No.
Federal prison.
I went to a hearing, so, you know, the nature of the timeline, right? So I blew the whistle anonymously, May 16th, 2023, right? The Texas bill got passed within 24 hours, reaffirming the illegality of what they were doing, right? Which is what the hospital had recognized and what the AG had said in his opinion. More whistleblowers came out a couple of days later.
Oh, really? Yeah, okay. Yeah. So people did once you, so they followed suit.
Yeah, yeah. And even more so later in the story.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Oh, you didn't know about that?
No.
Oh, just wait till, you think my story's crazy, just wait until this. But I think it's worth getting into.
Yeah, go ahead.
But so, all right. So the timeline, right? So May 16th, the story comes out on the anonymous whistleblower. May 17th, a day later, the Texas bill gets passed. A couple days later, another whistleblower, a nurse who works in the clinic, comes out in a story with Christopher Rufo and says that, like, this is happening. They're lying about it. But what's happening in this clinic is way more horrifying than anyone could imagine. Like, people are getting put on blockers, hormones, after like 20-minute visits, 30-minute visits. And then the AG announces an investigation into the hospital. And then the hospital says they're shutting down the program. So like maybe 2 weeks later. So I'm anonymous, right? So everything goes quiet after that.
And you knew about it how, if you didn't?
Because I worked there.
Because you worked there and you knew the other surgeons.
Yeah, yeah. Because they told me. Yeah, I watched the lectures. They were public. Yeah. They had public Zoom conferences with 150 people. Like a bunch of medical students, all the directors of the program, yeah. Like, they weren't trying to hide it necessarily. They were like openly talking about it. Yeah.
Okay. So back to the timeline then.
Yeah. So, you know, everything was anonymous, right? But then on June 23rd, 2023, about a month and a half after, was the day of my graduation from surgical training, right? One of the most important days of my life. Sure. Because you sacrifice all this time during the past 5 years, and the day you graduate is like really important. So we're getting ready for the ceremony later that day, and then 2 armed agents with Health and Human Services come to our door, and they inform me that I'm I'm a potential target of a criminal investigation regarding medical records. So I kind of knew that, like, yeah, I know what's going on here. Like, they're trying to destroy me.
And they targeted your wife too.
Well, yeah, it was, so I kind of freaked out when they came to my door.
Yeah, sure.
Didn't really know what to do, so I invite them in. We sit down, they set up like a little tripod, like just kind of like here, right? And then my wife was getting ready for the ceremony. She comes out and we both go into our room and we talk privately and we say, probably not the best idea to talk with them without an attorney present. And we tell them and they say, okay. And then they say, okay, fine, but here's a target letter. It's a letter that informed me I was a potential target of a criminal investigation. So then they leave. And then after they left, we knew that like here it is, from this moment on, our lives are changed for forever. It's never going to be the same. But we have a decision to make, do we submit to this evil ideology? Because we knew why they were there. They were there to intimidate, to instill fear. And they knocked on the wrong door. I mean, that's because we decided to fight.
I just want to get back to this thing that is so un-American to me, and I just want to make sure. This is clearly ideologically driven. And if a different president had a different ideology, I'm not endorsing anybody, I'm just asking to figure this out. If it were someone else with a different attorney general, with a different, even though you're in Texas now, it would have been different. And
of course.
Yeah.
I mean, it's well, first of all, I think if it was another administration, this would never be allowed to happen because this was something that was celebrated by the administration. Right. The people who were doing it were able to have cover because as we know now, as the discovery from Alabama, from their case challenging their law is coming out, none of this was ever based on evidence.
Winston, come here.
Come on, boy.
Good boy. No, we want Winston over here.
Come on. None of this was ever based on evidence, right? This was, or like objective clinical evidence. This was all ideological. And we know this because of Richard Levine, right? The admiral with Health and Human Services or whatever, said that they should eliminate age limits, not because of any evidence, but because it was bad for the movement, right? And this is someone who said that he would have never transitioned when he was a child because that means he would never have his own children. But the most important thing in his life, his children, is something that he's taking away from thousands, from tens of thousands, potentially hundreds of thousands of children. And he's doing it for ideological reasons. So I think if it was a different administration, and maybe I'm wrong about that because it was kind of happening before, because we were not awake to it. We didn't know the pervasiveness of it, but now we kind of are.
It's conspicuous, it's ideological, it's driven home. Diversity, equity, and inclusion requirements and initiatives are throughout the federal government. I guess what is so disturbing to me is that instead of going after you, we should go after all these people who are going after you for something clearly politically motivated. And I think what really disturbs me is that, throw you a little curveball, Stalin died of old age. These people who have butchered these children are going to get away with it. The hospital administrators and the president of the hospital is going to get away with it.
Well, I think that, that's a decision that we make, right? People get away with things because we let them get away with it. That's the reality of it. It doesn't have to be that way.
So you think there's still hope that university presidents at teaching hospitals and CEOs of hospitals and surgeons will serve jail time for this?
Well, I think that I don't really see it as hope. I see it as it has to happen.
Oh, I think it
has to. Because
but it will never happen under a Biden administration.
No, absolutely not. Yeah. No, I mean, unless states become more, they start representing their constituents, right? If red states start doing their job, then they will start going after these people. All they have to, and it's not like becoming more conservative. It's no, they just have to do their job. Because if I were to do the same thing, right, to another patient, and I actually had this situation, it's if I cannot justify a certain procedure I'm doing for someone, the insurance company will reach out to me and say, hey, why are you doing this? Explain yourself, right? Totally justified. That's their job, right? And if I continue to do something that's not justified, then I lose my license, I go to jail. But in this case, it's different because it's political, right? We just have to understand that this has always been illegal. It's never been legal to do this to children or anyone. So we just have to really enforce the law.
And the law being what specifically?
Enforce the law that you cannot use a medical practice to mutilate children, to...
Seems pretty reasonable.
Yeah.
It's a pretty low threshold.
Yeah. Yeah. Like you can't sterilize people.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, and that's like, we were kind of talking about it earlier, like, you know, we got breakfast earlier. I remember, like, it's like, whenever we talk about this, like, whenever I have any conversation, I find myself, like, even though I've had this conversation a million times, like, there's like this period of time where I'm engaging with someone else and I feel like in the out-of-body experience, because at some point, what are we talking about? Like, how crazy is it that me and you are sitting here right now having this conversation? Because, like, I'm a no one, right? I remember reading your stuff like years ago, and like now we're sitting in a couch in my living room talking about how we should enforce laws to not sterilize children, right? Like, what the hell? How did we get to this point? Like, we know how it started, but how is it going to end?
That's the question. Yeah.
How is it going to end?
And fire.
Yeah, yeah. And we know it's going to end with destruction. And there's going to be a generation of children who wake up one day who are saying, you know, the people who were supposed to love and protect me were the ones who had destroyed me, right? The ones who were, you know, sometimes my parents, my doctors, my friends, my counselors, my teachers. These were the people who were supposed to guide me into a future that was the right place to go, but these were the ones who had fed me to the wolves. And then when they wake up and make that realization, then, like, how can we blame them for wanting to end their life? I mean, it's so painful. And I, you know, it's a place that I could never imagine being in. And I feel that we should remember that for people like us, that the people who this has been done to, these people have been victimized. So
they're actual victims, unlike everybody who wants to be a victim.
So even the people who are activists, right? The people who you see on the streets with purple hair, right? And they're on hormones and they've had surgery. Like, it doesn't excuse their behavior, but we should remember that they have been victimized. And that when they do start turning a corner, that we should provide a soft landing zone.
Totally.
That we should be understanding of when they start realizing what's been done. And we should have grace for them, but not ever excuse the behavior of the people who have perpetuated this crime.
I couldn't possibly agree more. Getting back to your how is this going to end, is one way that this could end is just the lawfare, the massive legal suits, class action suits, etc., among people who have had their genitals mutilated as children, suing the institutions and actually the physicians going after their medical licenses.
I think so. I think it has to be a couple of different avenues. I think there has to be lawsuits, which there are. And once you have a couple of cases that make their way and that once they win, then it's going to open up the floodgates. But of course, you have an activation energy, kind of like in physics, right? Like, in order for an enzymatic reaction to happen, it has to exceed a certain threshold of energy in order to get to that point. And I think it's the same way with this. Like, right now, we're in like the activation energy phase, like where slowly momentum is building. You have all these this information coming out from Europe, from the Cass report, from the New York Times, right? We have all these detransitioners.
Schellenberger stuff.
Schellenberger, the WPATH files, WPATH tapes, everything. And at some point, it's going to reach an activation energy where things are going to start changing.
It has in the UK.
Exactly.
Andrew Doyle's done some great stuff on that. Helen Joyce has done some great stuff on that.
I spoke with Andrew Doyle not too long ago.
He's a good friend of mine.
He's a good guy. And Stella O'Malley.
Yeah,
like, these people are the best. Carrie Mendoza, all these people are really, really good people. But And then once it hits that activation energy, then it's going to start breaking out into a couple of different areas. So legal prosecution, right, for civil lawsuits. So you're going to have it on the civil side. Then it's going to be hospitals on the civil side. And then it's going to be doctors on the criminal side. Then hospitals on the criminal side. Because it's already been established, like, this is criminal negligence, in my opinion, right? Like, and there's, like, one of the neurosurgeons in Dallas, Dr. Death, his name was Christopher Dunch. Have you ever heard of that?
I have.
Yeah. He was the guy who operated on people when he should have never operated on them, right, for his own narcissistic benefit, right? He was kind of a crazy guy. But when you read the testimony, the closing statements in that trial, it's almost like you can take those statements and then superimpose it onto this situation. That man is spending the rest of his life in prison for doing that to his patients, right?
So in The Art of War, Sun Tzu talks about, like, you never want to back a man into a corner because then he'll fight. It's like, that's why we don't give the death penalty for everything, is because then criminals will do anything they can to avoid getting caught and kill a bunch of people, etc. The people who have done this are backed into a corner because if they realize what's going to happen, they have every vested interest to fight tooth and nail with everything, economic resources, to leverage every possible thing they can, because they know what's going to happen once the ideology falls into ill repute. Like, they know what's going to happen once people wake up to realize what they've done to just untold numbers of children.
Yeah, and I think that's, in this situation, right, with them coming after me, I think that's exactly what's happening. It's like, I realize that they're backed into a corner. Like, this is not them demonstrating confidence. This is them demonstrating weakness, desperation. So it's at that point that it's most important to push forward, to stand strong, to not fear anything from them, but to fear something that exists outside of this world. And I know we may believe different things, but I do believe that there is a higher power, right? That I believe that when I die, I will have to answer to something that is outside of this world. And when I fear that, if that's real, if I truly believe that, then there's nothing these people can do that is greater than what can potentially happen, than what will happen after, than the accountability I will have to face. Because I believe in that. I believe that we are guided by something greater, and that we will be held accountable for what we do in this world. So.
Okay, so we now have a case in which we don't know the numbers of people. I think Tavistock is like, we don't know how many children have been affected by this. We have detransitioners who are increasingly coming out. Peterson had, I forget her name, Chloe something.
Chloe Cole, yeah.
Yeah, Cole.
Prisha Mosley, Soren.
That's right.
Aldacco, yeah. I mean, these are, Corey Cohn. I mean, these are, and their stories are horrifying.
We also know that it's a very brief period of time, say 20 minutes, as you said, and I've heard that repeatedly. Kind of people have gone in Project Veritas style to get affirmed as opposed to have a conversation. That's just parenthetically why I don't think that the response to somebody who says, I feel like I'm born in the wrong body, is therapy if the entire therapeutic enterprise is compromised.
Yeah.
If it's all beholden to the ideology, because the purpose would be to affirm. So we find ourselves in a precarious situation in which the people who have been performing these surgeries have every conceivable vested interest to continue to perform them and to deny that they're harmful, to say that they're beneficial. We have parents, as the interview I did with Helen Joyce, she so amazingly articulated. Parents will be the last one to admit that something is wrong. They will fight tooth and nail because they can never admit the horror for which they've done to their kids.
Yeah, to self-reflect is to self-immolate.
Yeah, to self-reflect is to self. And, what do you think about that idea of why people won't say they're sorry for this?
Yeah, so I think that the reason people are so antagonistic to acknowledging the truth, the reason they won't say sorry is because to apologize sincerely is not just words, right? That is reflection. That is, in order to say the words, there has to be something you acknowledge that I did something wrong. But it's that acknowledgement that will lead to a conclusion that they were the ones who said they were protecting these children when they were actually the ones who were destroying them. And not only that, but the ones who were trying to save these children, people like us, were the ones they had said were trying to harm these children.
Nazis.
Exactly. Transphobes, racists, whatever. And not only the ones that were trying to protect these children like us, they didn't just call them names, but they took away their careers, right? They destroyed their lives. They tried to throw them in prison, right? So for them to come to that conclusion, for them to make that acknowledgement, which leads to the I'm sorry, is something that I think many people do not ever have the capacity to do, which is why, like, we know where it started, but how does it end? Like, that's a question that we'll all have to, we don't know. There's no way for us to know, but we know it's going to end probably with fire.
The consequences of their self-reflection to even get to the point of saying sorry are so ghastly.
Yeah.
They're so truly monstrous, because that they would have to be honest with themselves, if the apology is sincere, about what it is that they did.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's not like we don't have precedent for this, because, you know, think about crimes in our previous history over generations, and not necessarily like the very distant past, but people who have committed atrocious crimes and people who have gone along with it. It's, you hold those people accountable, right? You hold a few people accountable. And that's the only way for people to fall in line, for there to be a sense of justice. Because it's not like, say we just ban these interventions, right? It never happens again. That's not enough. Like, that is not enough, because there is still an issue with justice where the people who are guilty are walking free.
Totally.
And
can I want to pause you there? I think we need to talk about who those people are, because it's not merely the surgeons. It's all of the people who enable them. It's the hospital administration. They cannot be allowed to walk free. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's no question. There's no question. You know, the people who had, like, and especially when you look at WPATH, and I think WPATH is the organization that should be on the priority list in terms of accountability, right? Is people who said outwardly, publicly, that this is evidence-based medicine, that we have the studies to support this. But at the same time, which we now know, which we all of us already kind of knew, but now it's more publicly known, that behind closed doors, they were saying the exact opposite. They didn't have any evidence, that what they were doing, they knew that was wrong, that they were removing age limits because of political concerns, not scientific concerns. So what is it when a doctor tells something to their patient that they know is not true, but they say it anyway for their own benefit? Like, what is that? Like, that's negligence, right? In other situations.
It'd be worse than negligence, wouldn't it be? If you knew it's true and you said it anyway.
Yeah.
Negligence is like when you're negligent to a dog, you just don't feed or give it water.
Yeah.
This is like the intentional.
That's true. I agree. Yeah, maybe it's not. So it's almost like worse than negligence. It's like assault.
Yeah.
Right? Because in one case, you have people who are lying, but they're not just doing nothing. They're not just
correct.
Negligent about a condition, right? They're proposing something they know is going to be harmful.
They're using their authority granted to them by the state, and instead of doing no harm, they're intentionally harming people when they knew it.
Exactly. So it's
So what is the penalty for that? I mean, I'm not an attorney, but
yeah.
it would have to be. I mean, I'm not a fan of the death penalty, but I mean, what is the penalty? Maybe you take away their license. That's not nearly enough, but you imprison them for life without parole, without the possibility of parole.
Yeah, I think you have to look at if what other situations where there are doctors who have...
That's exactly what you would do.
And what you would do is think about
right.
Dr. Death, right? Someone who operated on people. It wasn't just negligence. It's not like he just ignored problems that he knew were there. No. He actively deceived his patients into believing something that was not true. It was under those false pretenses that those people went to an operating room. And it was because of what he did in the operating room that they had suffered a lifetime sentence dealing with the consequences of his actions. So
yeah, they became lifelong medical patients because of something he knew. Like, I guess you'd have to find someone, again, case law, who intentionally operated on someone when they either didn't need it or did some kind of damage to them. Look what happened to them and apply it to this case. We cannot let the administrations get away with this.
No,
we just can't. Like, that's a red line.
And it's not like if, like, we can hope, we can. No. It has to be. We have to, because like we cannot exist as men if we allow this to happen, right? It's like what will our children say of us if we allow this to happen? If we allow them to just get away with it, right? Then we cannot call ourselves men.
There's a lot. Well, first, there's a lot at stake, but I would love to be talking to you about virtually anything else.
Yeah.
We should be talking about a lot of other things, but yet we are continuously dragged into this deranged quicksand, this predicament, by people who are clearly mentally ill, supported or buttressed by cowardice. And you're right, you stand as someone who opposes this. They have to do everything they can to destroy you. It's interesting, if they thought they had good reasons and evidence for it, they'd just present it. But
yeah.
They don't present. Like, for I know nothing about medicine, but you know, if you're going to put in a heart stent, do you know how to do that?
No, I mean, I don't do that, but like, it happens all the time.
Okay, but if you're, well, it's like someone who's going to put in a heart stent, and someone says, well, why are you going to use this procedure? They'd say, well, they'd explain why they're going to use it. They wouldn't have to run away. They wouldn't have to hide. They wouldn't say, fuck you.
Yeah.
They would say, this is why. This is how I'm putting in the heart stent.
Yeah, they wouldn't go after the person like who exposed that, right? Like they would say like it wouldn't even be a story, right?
No, if someone had a better way to put in a heart stent, that's the problem with not only demeaning evidence, but we've had a kind of a sea change in how we've thought about these things.
Yeah. Where it's not like where like it's everything in my mind is like anti-evidence. It's like anti whatever it is. Like, this is not medicine. It's not like this is like a few degrees off from what's true and good. Like, in order to do true medicine, you have to be oriented at least in the right direction, right? You have to try to preserve and strengthen naturally occurring physiology. But what this is like orientation in the exact opposite direction, where they are destroying and disassembling naturally occurring physiology. So like it's anti-medicine and just like evidence, right? Like, we have to show reliable, accurate, objective evidence that something is true, like that our intentions line up with consequences. Like, if I do an operation on someone, I have to accurately, reliably show that that person gets better after. And like, that's not theoretical. Like, I had clinic 2 days ago. Every person who comes into that clinic was better off after than they were before. That is the gold standard.
Well, yeah, I mean, if everybody's worse off, what would be the point of doing the procedure?
Exactly. Yeah. But that's what's so crazy is that what happens in these situations with these transgender interventions, they are worse off after. The risk of suicide goes up. Right.
And we know that. There's data for that now.
There's data for that, yeah. So it's anti-evidence. Their evidence doesn't show benefit, it shows harm. But then they finagle the evidence in order to show, well, there's like a relative benefit based on confounding variables and bogus studies. Because like the Mark Twain quote, like there's like lies, damn lies, and then statistics. Like you can use statistics to support any possible conclusion. You can use statistics to show that gravity is not real, but like, right? But everyone knows the truth.
It's just diabolical.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
It's just so vile, and I wonder how people are going to look back at this. You know, I wonder how people are going to look back and say, what happened to these people? What were they thinking? Why was everybody a coward? Why was everybody so quiet? Why?
Well, and you know, I think the question is, like, it's not necessarily, I think that when you look at the past, that's the rule. That's not the exception. Like why were people cowards? Why did they not do anything? Well, that's how people are always, you know? Like, that's the rule. That's not the exception.
You know, I was thinking the other day, I've heard, I wonder what I would have done if the Nazis were in power. I wonder, like, what would I have been, what would my role have been? Well, you don't have to ask that question anymore, you know.
Yeah.
We know exactly how you would have been, not only with regard to this issue, with all of the multiple sources of demented behavior was being institutionalized, these systematic discrimination against Asians, etc. Were you silent? Did you fight back? We know exactly. So if you want to know what you would have done when the Nazis took over, you don't have to worry very much. You don't have to wonder anymore. We know exactly.
Yeah.
How did you behave in the last 10 years?
Yeah, and I think that we have to know that we are all the ones who would be guilty of it, right? Like how would I act if I was in that situation? Well, I have to believe.
Well, now you know how you'd act.
Well, yeah, but it's like the only reason I decide, you know, I spoke out is because I know that I'm capable of going along with it, right? Because I know I have to understand that I'm capable of being one of those people who can be complicit in an awful crime.
Well, everybody's,
Yeah.
I mean, we all have, and we're all kind of weighing this internal calculus, you know, like, 10 years in a federal prison, that doesn't sound like fun. My wife is pregnant. Like, I won't see my child for years. Like, we're all the social benefits, the social stigma, the shame, the guilt, I mean, we're all weighing this stuff, but some people weigh it and they just do the right thing. The overwhelming majority of people don't.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I think, you know, that's one of the things that's bothered me recently is all these kind of self-assured, pompous people come out now that a lot of this stuff is easy. Well, where were you 10 years ago?
Yeah, yeah. And, you know, it's I think that it goes to show how, when you do speak up, what happens, because, and I don't want to forget that other story, you know, with the other whistleblower, because that's...
Oh, yeah. Tell us that, yeah.
So you have... so after the story comes out, right, we decide to fight back. We spent 6 months... I tried to remain anonymous, and I did everything I could because we didn't want to blow up our lives. But it was during that time that the corruption we saw was happening was so bad, we had to do something about it. So my attorneys wrote a letter to Congress. They kind of blew the whistle themselves in a way, by making public what was happening. And, you know, in that letter, it goes to show that, you know, the DOJ, even though they sent agents to my home without knowing any of the facts of the case, they didn't know what the story was, but they sent agents to my home on the day of my graduation, right? Despite the fact that they didn't know any of the facts of the case, they did enough research to find out that my wife was undergoing a background check because she had been hired by the Department of Justice. And the prosecutor did enough research to say, well, you know, I'm surprised she would, you know, obstruct this case because, and she's not going to have any problems unless she continues to become difficult. And the implication being that, you know, her advising me to have an attorney present is like obstruction of justice when it's a constitutional right. But the letter goes on to say that, you know, they said that they were going to take me to trial even if they were sure they were going to lose, right? Right. So what conclusion can we make, right? Well, they're going to destroy me no matter what if I'm anonymous, so I might as well try to fight back. So I took my story public after 6 months in January of 2024.
That's the only way to deal with these people.
Yeah.
There's simply no other way.
Because they're going to destroy you, right? It's like the person who's being targeted by the corruption is the one who lends the corruption legitimacy. Yeah. If you just tell the story, the corruption becomes self-evident. So I tell this story publicly, right? And then, but also during that time, we had spent like $250,000. Everything we've ever saved, our retirement, our investments, all of our disposable income, but still now, you know, we don't have any money, right? And
well, you have 1,000.
Yeah, for a doctor and a lawyer to have like $6,000 in their bank account, like is, you know,
7.
Yeah, it's now 7. Yeah, well, no, 6 because we're gonna put that right into the legal fund.
Right.
Yeah, but so
who was the other whistleblower?
So what happened was the other whistleblower. So June 4th, 2024, 3 heavily armed federal U.S. Marshals come to my home 7 a.m. to serve me an indictment, right? I'm being charged with 4 federal felonies facing up to 10 years in prison, right? And then June 17th, right, 2 weeks later, I go to my first hearing where I plead not guilty, where I'm standing in a courtroom, right, with a bunch of people with orange jumpsuits. And here I am, right, getting booked, right, for blowing the whistle for this crazy thing. And it's like,
make it up.
What world are we living in, you know? And then, but then the day after, a story comes out with Christopher Rufo. The other whistleblower, the original person, the nurse who was working in this clinic, decides to come out. And she tells a story that not only was a hospital lying to the public, but they were defrauding. They were allegedly defrauding insurance companies. So it's like because it's like I told this story publicly. It's like this person, Vanessa, you know, it's like people think my story is crazy. Her story is like way more insane. Like not only were they lying, but the way they did it is like the thing that's like really unique. But by unique I mean horrifying and vicious and evil. So allegedly, if this is true, if what she's saying is true, what they were doing is they would take a kid who believed, like a boy who believed he was a girl. And in Texas, it's always been illegal. You cannot use Medicaid funds to pay for these interventions, right? And insurance companies also won't cover it, other insurance companies. So what they would do in order to get it covered is they would use fake diagnoses, right, allegedly. So estrogen deficiency. So you have a boy who believes he's a girl. So in the medical record, it says female everywhere in the charts. And then the diagnosis would be estrogen deficiency. They couldn't use gender dysphoria as the diagnostic code for the insurance company because that would be not kosher, right? That would be illegal. So what they do is they use a fake diagnosis, estrogen deficiency. So when the insurance company sees it, they see estrogen deficiency in a female in order to justify the payment for this intervention, right? But that's fraud. That's illegal. You can't do that, right? So that's like they're using the evidence of their healthy physiology as evidence of their disease, right? So the fact that this kid is healthy is what they're using as evidence of the disease that they bill to an insurance company. If that's true, which I highly doubt that this is untrue if she's willing to come out with these allegations, because these allegations have severe implications if you allege it with it not being true.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, so what is going through the mind of these people who are doing this?
Well, are we surprised?
So
are we
ideologically,
what consequences? Yeah. What consequences, right? It's like up until this point, right? It's only like, it's because she decided to come out that something might be done, right? But it's because of, you had someone who's brave enough, like she's a random person just like me, like we're nobody, we're no one, right? Like for them, we're just peasants. But like because she's coming out, she's willing to speak out, these people might be held accountable. I have to believe they're going to be held accountable.
Oh, I hope you're right.
And it's not the like we've had some support from politicians, from some really, really good people like Ted Cruz, Josh Hawley, Dan Crenshaw, Brian Harrison, in the Texas Senate, some guy who's like, this guy's the real deal, Brian Harrison. And it's because of whistleblowers like us that, like, something like this can happen. But like,
so what's going through their head? Like, why are they doing this? If it's illegal, they're lying to the public. Like, what is it? Are they just so, Charlie Munger says, show me an incentive and I'll show you an outcome.
Yeah. Well, and it's. I think that's part of it. I think that's a component, because when you medicalize a 11-year-old child, well then, like, the amount of money that you can make over the next decade is like unbelievable. We're talking about billions and billions of dollars.
Well, because they become lifelong medical patients.
Yeah. Lifelong medical patients by their own protocol, right? Like, they have to take, like, their existence, right? Them not killing themselves is based on them, on a doctor's prescription pad or a surgeon's recommendations. That is what they say. There is no off-ramp for them. There is nothing, because any off-ramp is prevented by the moral blackmail of suicide. So of course, they have to stay on this for the rest of their lives, right, in order to justify it.
So you think the hospital administrators were financially motivated?
Oh, of course. I mean, that's my opinion. Oh yeah, absolutely, because it's like, how much money can they make? I mean, there was that video from Nashville, from Vanderbilt, where they say, well, we can make a ton of money with these procedures, $40,000 for a surgery. Yeah. I heard stories from Northern California where the orthopedic surgeons are being pushed out of operating room time for the gender surgeons. And a lot of people won't understand the significance of that. Anyone who works in the operating room will immediately be shocked, because
I don't understand the significance.
Orthopedic surgeons rule the roost of because they make the most money, because they use hardware. So if you have orthopedic surgeons being pushed out, then that means whatever surgeon is pushing these people out is making crazy amounts of money.
Okay, so if that's true, it's even more dastardly than I thought.
Yeah.
Because if the motivation is financial as opposed to ideological, that makes them not merely wrong, but just
and consider this, especially about the surgery, is that the people who run WPATH, right? They are charlatans of the highest order. These people sell snake oil. These people are the most vile deceivers you can imagine. Like, we can't even call them doctors. They are the exact they're anti-doctors. But WPATH will launder their phony recommendations to the other organizations, right? So it's like a cartel of medical negligence. They create this product like a drug, and they launder these phony recommendations to other organizations like the American Academy of Pediatrics, the Endocrine Society. And what they'll do is these other societies will adopt their phony recommendations, and then from that you have something called a Castro consensus, right? You have this perception of consensus within the medical community that's actually total baloney, right? It's like completely fake, but all the recommendations come from the original source, the cartel of medical negligence, WPATH. But the people who are making those recommendations are the same surgeons who have lucrative surgery practices in like Southern California, the ones who are doing these surgeries. And I can't think of the name, but like, if you pull it up, right, you have a WPATH surgeon who is on the committee board, the recommendation board for the Endocrine Society. It's the same person who is also the one making recommendations for the American Academy of Plastic Surgeons, right? It's like the same person who's laundering fake recommendations to all these organizations, right? So it's just, in my mind, like a criminal entity, right? People who are
a cartel
of medical negligence, right? Nothing more, nothing less. They're a cartel of medical negligence. And we should just start treating it that way, because now we have the evidence. We've always kind of knew it's true, but now we have irrefutable evidence, especially with the WPATH files, the WPATH tapes, the discovery coming from Alabama, everything, right? You have their own words, right? Their own words, yeah.
I'm starting to think maybe there was no punishment too great, given that somebody would ruin countless children's lives in the worst conceivable way, there probably is no punishment too great for them.
I think that's a reasonable opinion. And, you know, of course, I think that's one of those things that has to be, you know, in order to maintain justice, it has to be legal, right? It has to go through a court. People have to be tried by a jury of their peers. But at this point, it's like, if what we're talking about is not just criticism, it's not just like, no, but moving the needle, right? Like we were talking about earlier, like we both can't stand it when people just complain, but like what is it that they're doing, right? Like to move the needle forward. Like we're in a position, people like us, where it's like we can maybe make an impact. Like people like you, maybe not me, but like people like you. But we can move the needle forward. It's not just about criticizing this, it's about holding them accountable.
That's right. It has to be about that.
Yeah, it's not just about defense, but offense, which is like what we've always believed in my case too. It's not just, we can't just tell this story about them coming after me, like this profound corruption. Like, no, afterwards, we have to hold these people accountable, right, for what they've done. There's no other option. Because if we don't hold them accountable, then they're just going to do the same thing to someone else.
And the machine is going to perpetuate, and they will silence all critics, and more children will get hurt.
Yeah.
And the crisis of cowardice will be perpetuated.
Yeah, yeah. And it's like, but the crisis of cowardice is perpetuated, but what we can do is take that same like principle, right, where cowardice is perpetuated when other people are cowards. But it doesn't have to be that way, because it's also like heroism in truth can be perpetuated in the same fashion, where it's like with this other whistleblower, it's like, well, I was willing to speak out. Yeah, Vanessa was willing to speak out and do the same thing. And
she was only willing to speak out after, subsequent to you speaking out.
Well, I mean, she's
like, you paved the way and made it easy.
She's got some serious cojones. She's got some chutzpah. You know, I mean, I think for her, like, I see her as like, she's on a whole different level than me, like way above. I see her as like,
they must despise her.
They must hate her, you know, but like for me, really, it's like, I see her as like, she's way above me in terms of courage. I see myself as just like a schmo. Like she is like up here.
You're definitely not a schmo.
Yeah.
I wonder I wonder what can, like, so people listening to this, I'm trying to think, like, what can motivate people who know there's an injustice, who know that the system is corrupt, whether it be the peer-reviewed system, whether it be, I mean, there are just so many systems at this point. Our institutions have wholly failed us on a number of levels.
Well, you know, if there's one thing that like would motivate them, right? Is that the question? Well, I would say, you know, I'm not like an evangelist, but if there's one thing I will evangelize on, it's this. It's that, like, when we had started this whole thing, it's like I thought that we were going to step into this world and it was just going to be darkness, right? That it was going to be a free fall until my impending destruction, right? But even with that, it was still the right thing to do. But what I'm realizing is that, like, once I stepped out into this world, that it's not this world of darkness, it's actually a world of light, right? That the grass is so much greener on the other side. That
100%.
Even though it seems, and that's why I want to, like, I'm not an evangelist, but I'll evangelize on this, man. Because, like, you step out into this world, you think you're going to be destroyed, but it's actually so much better than you can ever imagine, because there's this entire world of people who are willing to stand up, who are willing to do the right thing, who are willing to stand by you and sacrifice something meaningful for a cause worth fighting for. And it's like, man, like, you'll have everyone, so many people come to your side and be like, you know what, like, you sacrifice, I will sacrifice with you. And I believe that because it's like my legal team, like, they've sacrificed, they've put their jobs, their profession on the line to do this. You know, other people have, like Vanessa, she sacrificed everything to do the right thing. But for the first time in my entire life, we can look into the mirror and say, like, I can live truthfully. I can live with dignity. I don't have to lie. Whatever they take from me, my daughter will grow up knowing that her father was willing to fight for a future. And if that is not a greener pastures, then there's nothing fucking that is, you know, then there's nothing that's worth doing that is worth sacrificing for, but that is worth sacrificing for.
And you'll know who your friends are and who they are not.
Yeah, yeah. So it's always the most terrifying in the beginning because you don't know what world, it's like the unknown. But it's that unknown that you should go towards. It's that unknown that you should strive towards because that is a world that's much better than the one you're living in now. And that's a fact. That's one thing that's true.
It's more authentic.
It's the most authentic. It's not more, it's the most authentic. And like you can attest to this too, like how much have you sacrificed, right? Yeah. I mean, you know, it's you can't even.
And my life is so much better now as a result.
Everyone says that. Everyone, it's true because like you might lose something, but you gain something in the process. You might lose your freedom, but you gain your dignity in the process. You might lose your finances, but you gain your truth in the process. And they, like, the only things they can take away are the things that we're willing to give away. But we are the ones in control now, right? We're the ones who, they require our compliance in order to ensure our destruction, you know? Like, and all we have to do is refuse. All we have to do is say no. To say no, like we're not going along with it. You want to destroy our future? No. We refuse. We will not comply. We will not go along with your phony world, with your clown world. We're not going to go along with it any longer. And we're willing to sacrifice for saying no, right? And like that's a much better world than the alternative. And for all those people out there who like, you know, then they have to understand that that's the truth. It is better out there.
Awesome.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it's true. It's just, it's all true.
Yeah. Like if you love your children, like it's true. Like if you love your children, there's times in previous generations where mothers and fathers left their home knowing that they weren't going to come back but that's what it is to love your children. You can't say you love your children unless you're willing to do that. If you're not willing to do that, then you don't love your children, then you love yourself.
And you know, like you told me that when this is over, you just want a job and just do surgery.
Just want to operate on people.
Yeah, and so I never wanted any of this. You never wanted any of this. I basically just wanted a small university position where I get to teach and read and write. I never really wanted any of this. You never wanted any of this. And now here we are hanging out.
Yeah, yeah. But it's people like us that are the greatest danger to them.
Totally.
Because, you know, it's like that Solzhenitsyn quote, right? It's no force of resistance is stronger than the average person who is just pushed too far, because it's that person who has to commit himself to destroying his former self and to becoming an entirely new person. And once that person dedicates himself to becoming this new person, fighting this Leviathan, then he knows that there's no going back, that there is only existential destruction waiting for him if he fails. And that's what people like us know. Like when we take on this fight, we know that there's no going back, that once we swim, we commit to the swim across this ocean, right? The Red Sea, that like either we die or we make it to the other side. Either the ocean splits or we die. And there's an old biblical story that I always find fascinating, is that, you know, when the Jews were coming out of Egypt and they got to the Red Sea and they thought, oh my God, like the Red Sea is not splitting, like and we have the Egyptians behind us, and what are we gonna do? Like we're gonna die, like we're gonna become slaves again. But then there was this character, Nachshon, right? He was a Jew, and he said, you know, he knew that if he has faith, that the sea will split. So, but he had to have faith. He had to move forward with doing something he knew was dangerous. So he jumps into the water and he was going to drown. But at the last possible moment, the sea splits. And it was only his act of faith, just an average guy, just an average schmo, that because of that act of faith, that the sea split and the Jews were able to escape.
And what is your faith in this? That this is your faith that the system isn't wholly corrupt? Or what is your faith? Is your faith that, well, what is it?
No, well, I believe that the system as it is now is fully corrupt.
I believe that as well.
Yeah, but it's my faith in something that's completely irrational, right? But it's true. It's something that is beyond explanation, that like doesn't sound.
Is your faith rooted in earthly things?
No, it's in God.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's like a faith in a God that is just, that rewards his believers and punishes his enemies, right? It's like this belief that there is a system that exists outside of our control, that there are rules that exist beyond our control, like gravity, like all these things, that like the objective moral order.
I was going to say, so then you think that there's a moral domain, a
Yeah.
moral realm outside of our control.
These things that we all know are good and bad, but we all know that inherently. It's universal human logic that dictates it. It's not like a social construct like they always say.
Right.
These things that can be universally reasoned, you know? So like, I believe that comes from God, from my faith in in my own faith as a Jew, right? That there is things that exist outside our control, that that there is hope for the future, right? That if we act in accordance with a covenant that was laid out in front of us, that we have to believe in, that I think even for people who may not believe, in some way they still believe in it. They may not believe, but they act in accordance with a faith, But it's like a faith in the irrational, but it only becomes laid out once you go through it, right? Because now it's like I can look back on the past and be like, all of it makes sense, Like the faith was properly placed because everything played out to where it should play out. So it wasn't illogical at all. It was actually the most rational thing. But at the time, it seemed illogical. But once people understand this, like, of course, it makes perfect sense. It's not crazy. To do nothing is a crazy thing.
To do nothing is to be complicit.
Yeah.
And I'm not a fan of evil, but in this case, I'm going to use the word.
Yeah. Yeah.
What is the quotation? All that it takes for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing.
Yeah.
Good people do nothing. And evil has been triumphing. Good people have been doing nothing.
Yeah. And it's a universal human principle that we know is true. That we don't need like we don't need a textbook to tell us, right? It's like these things are true because we can, they could be universally rationed to be true, right? And that's what faith is, in my opinion.
Well, I just am incredibly grateful. Like, I'm truly, truly grateful. I don't know the exact definition of verklempt. Isn't it like overcome by like verklempt?
Yeah.
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 No, I am. I'm incredibly grateful for what you've done. I'm incredibly grateful for your stances, for hanging out today, for the conversation.
Thank you.
Truly.
And if anyone wants to help support our legal fund,
yeah, please.
It's givesendgo.com/Texas_whistleblower. And every single dollar goes directly into the legal fight. So all everything you lost from your bet is going to go directly into that legal fund.
Awesome. I couldn't be happier. I've never been happier in my life that I lost the bet.
Yeah.
This is the best bet I ever lost.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome.
No, but it was great getting to know you and
Reed over there.
And I'm glad you got to meet my family and my dog.
Yeah. Winston.
Yeah, Winston.
Winston. I sent Winston's picture to Winston Marshall, and I told him that he shares his name.
Yeah. Named after Winston Churchill.
Okay. Yeah, I sat in when I was in London. I sat in Winston Churchill's chair. It was in a cigar shop. It was pretty cool.
We call him Winston Churchill.
Winston Churchill. That's a perfect name.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you for watching. Everything we do is under the umbrella of the National Progress Alliance. nationalprogressalliance.org. It's a nonprofit, independent 501c3. Your generous donations keep us going and keep fueling content like this. So please help us out. Make a donation. We very much appreciate it. Thank you.